Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how I plan canoe trips in Algonquin Park. This video only describes how I choose the canoe route and subsequently determine how much travel time and distance will be involved each day. The first thing I do is open Jeff's map of Algonquin, which can be downloaded at algonquinmap.com. I zoom in on the area where I'm planning the trip and take a screenshot. Then I save this screenshot to my desktop. The next thing I do is open the map back up and use the paint tool to trace the canoe route. In this case, the trip starts on the west side of the park at Magnetawan and heads north to the Nipissing River. The route continues downstream to High Falls, then heads south into Burnt Root and White Trout Lakes before turning back west by way of the upper Petawawa River. I then like to recrop my map so that it only includes areas of travel. The rest of the planning is done using Microsoft Excel. I open up my template and start modifying it to reflect the details of my new canoe trip. At the bottom of the worksheet, I have 3 tabs labeled Time, Distance, and Portage. I usually start on the Time tab, which I use to approximate travel times between various points on the map. Column A contains 2 points that I'm trying to determine how much time it will take to travel between. Column B gives the minimum amount of time, or the least amount of time it should take. This number comes from Jeff's map and represents how fast a competent paddler should be able to do it by himself. The max without add time column in column C is used as a variable. This number is derived by multiplying the minimum time in column B by 1.33. The point of this is to factor in conditions that could slow you down, such as wind or fatigue. The max with add time in column D is another variable. The number in this column comes from the map, where additional time is included in parentheses. The actual purpose of this number is to adjust your minimum time in the event that you are double carrying the portages, meaning that you're going back for a second trip. Double carrying has never been a factor on any of my canoe trips, but I use the additional time from Jeff's map as another variable that ultimately contributes to the value in the average column. I found that the average time in column E is usually pretty accurate when I'm by myself. When I'm in a group, the time tends to be closer to the value in the minimum column, but either way it's usually a safe bet that the amount of time it's going to take to get from A to B will be somewhere between the minimum time and the average time. I continue this process for all the points along the route. By breaking down each day into multiple points, you're able to track your progress better. For example, if you start at Magnetawan Lake at 12:30, you can assume that you should be at Hambone Lake shortly after 1 o'clock. Once you have all the values in your time columns, you can add them up to get an approximation of the time you will be traveling each day. These numbers are recorded further over to the right on the spreadsheet. This whole process is repeated for all the points along the route. I like to be specific with how I label my points in column A, so I have a better idea of where I should be after a certain amount of time. For example, in A17, instead of simply putting Nipissing River to further down the Nipissing River, I put 2 specific locations. As you work your way through the development of your timetable, you begin to see which days are going to be your long days, and perhaps even which days can be consolidated into one. This part can be one of the most tedious because it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of calculator work. Once you're finished working on the timetables, you can start working in the Distance tab. The purpose of these tables is to calculate how much distance is between various points on the map and ultimately how far you will be traveling each day. You can simply copy all the points from column A on the Time tab and post them into column A of the Distance tab. Enter the distances from Jeff's map under the kilometers column in column B. For me, I like to convert the kilometers into miles since I'm American, using an online converter like the one seen here. Once I've done this for all the points on a given day, I can add them up to get the total using the equals sum formula. Similar to your timetable analysis, you'll be able to see which days you'll be traveling the most distance on your distance table analysis. The last tab is the Portage tab, which is exactly what it sounds like. It includes the list of portages on the trip and their lengths categorized by day. Filling out this table requires going through the map and picking out all the portages along your route and recording their distances. Once you have done this, you can use the equal sum formula to calculate the cumulative amount of portaging to be done on any specific day. Again, I like to convert these numbers into miles. Now that I have all my tables filled out, I go back and look at my map. I see that the trip I have planned is a big loop more or less out of Ralph Bice Lake, so I decide to call this trip the Ralph Bice Loop. The last thing I can do is create an additional tab at the bottom of my spreadsheet for an overall analysis of my trip. I create a column for the average time and distance traveled each day, and another column for the total time and distance traveled over the course of the trip. I calculate these values by going back to the respective tabs using sum and average formulas. Using the information I have about portaging, I can also calculate how much distance will be covered on the water. Based on this analysis, I can see that each day of the trip will include about 6 hours of travel time over 10 miles, and about 20% of that distance will be portages. The entire trip will be about 48 hours of traveling, or 2 whole days. The total distance is nearly 80 miles with 14.5 miles of portaging and 65 miles of paddling. Well guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it. Hopefully now you see the advantages of meticulously planning your canoe trip route and that it can actually be quite fun. Also, Jeff's map of Algonquin is an incredibly useful tool in planning your trips, so take a look at that. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Safe travels to everyone.